Welcome to here at Pandesal Forum at 84-year-old Morning Bakery Cafe. This is organized in cooperation with Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. We have very interesting topics this morning related to the news headlines. The topic is war imminent, coming already here in our region? And are we, the Philippines, in the middle of a perception war? We have a group of panelists here who are experts on geopolitics and international politics. I will introduce one by one later on in detail. I'll just mention their name now. Later on, when I call them for their opening statements, I will introduce them properly, each one. Among our panelists this morning, we have, of course, Mr. Herman Laurel, also the very talented, brilliant foreign policy analyst, Sas Rodando Sasov here, and via Zoom, Professor Ana Malindo Puy, and also a former diplomat based in Washington, D.C. before, Ado Paglinawa. Let us invite them now for opening statement. Mr. Herman Laurel is president of Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute. He is also a public intellectual and an activist. Decades ago, he was also head of the Philippine Refugee Processing Center in Palawan, in Bataan, and in many other advocacies. Let us welcome Mr. Herman Laurel to give us an overview of this topic, and later on the opening statements of the other panelists. Welcome. Magandang araw po sa inyo lahat. Good morning. Kaya po ako nagsisimula po dahil ako pagpipilip po dito sa ating diskusyon. I am starting the discussion because I will give you background of our discussion. And we chose our title not from our domestic condition only, but international. Right now, this is the call all over the world. Speak up because war is coming if we do not stop it. Ano ba tayo? May poder ba tayo bilang tao? Or tayo sunod-sunuran lang sa mga naghahanggol? What are we? Are we human beings with the power to decide for our fate, to decide our future? Or are we just blind followers of the powers that be, that want to create war? So the global community is concerned about the coming war. Let us speak out against it. As I have said before, this is a war against war that we are engaged in. And before war can start, it always begins in the mind. As the UNESCO preamble states, war begins in the mind. It is the mind that will stop war. And the ruling powers of the West are now trying to create consent for the next war in our region. They have created it in Ukraine. They want to create it in Asia. The First World War was over and above the assassination of Archduke, whatever his name is.
Ferdinand.
Anyway, you know. It was an economic war, and I will read from history. At the time that preceded World War I, and in spite of the rise of economic liberalism and globalization, the protectionist income industry arguments held their sway among some of the major economies at the time, the US and Germany. Simultaneously, along with economic expansion came imperialism, the expansion of colonialism, and the ever deeper divide between central and periphery of the world's economy. And we see today the United States of America struggling against the tide of history, where a new power is rising, an economic power is rising, resisting any efforts to turn this into an armed geopolitical competition focusing on trade while the United States is fighting war. And this war will come to our region. Darating po sa Pilipinas itong gera ito. Huwag po tayong mag-tutuwahin na tayo ay ligtas dito sa gera. Let us not pretend that we are going to be able to escape this war if we do not stop it. Now, itong nakaraang sa the past 10 years, the powers that be from the West, and now, for whatever reason, is joined in by the powers that be in the Philippines, is working together to create this consent for war in our region. Let me just show you some reactions from the world to our situation. On the normal region from Venezuela, South America, Latin America. There is a report here entitled Manufacturing Consent for the Containment and Encirclement of China. Okay. The following image I will show is what has been for 10 years founded into the public Filipino mind. What is this? Let's go to the report of DL. Chinese militia vessels swarmed West Philippines Sea and Europe ahead of PBBM Biden meeting. And I just read, I think, the Tribune article of Ali Roque, who mentioned in this article, why is it that every time there is a meeting between the Philippines and China, some event like this is reported? But what is the truth about the maritime militia of China? It is not, of course, the only maritime militia in the region. Vietnam has it and other countries have it, or greater or lesser degree. But what is the truth about the Chinese maritime militia? Here's from a report from the Rajaratnam School of International Studies of Singapore by Hugo, May 30, 2022. It says here, it is no secret that China has a maritime militia. However, the number, role, and influence of China's maritime militia have been too far exaggerated. Certain U.S. scholars with a tendency to exaggerate that China threat. Tapos po, ito po ay ulitin ng mga so-called scholars natin sa Pilipinas from the Albert de Rosario Institute and the likes. So every year, in March and April and March, lalabas po itong image na ito. Chinese militia vessels swarm West Philippines Sea ahead of BBM Biden meeting. Every year since 2012, merong lumalabas March, April. Kaya po yan, nagpuputol dyan sa wheat and so on. Dahil sa Mayo, every May, China has the fishing moratorium for Chinese fishing vessels. So this is the wind-up of the fishing season from September to April. The last month of the fishing season in April, so they're preparing to wrap up their activities. Every year, yeah, you will know every year, same pictures are coming out, same so-called maritime militia in the Hunian Reef or in some of the other reefs, because they're getting together in the reefs for protection, for organizing the wrap-up of their fishing activity. But this is presented as a threat about China. Later on, I will show you, there is no truth, there is absolutely no harassment of Filipino fishermen. Ulit-ulit nila. At masabi hinaharas ng Filipino fishermen. That is absolutely not true. If it were true, if it were a policy of China, that there will be no Filipino fishermen able to fish in the South China Sea. We know the discipline of the Chinese military and Coast Guard and police. But paulit-ulit harassment now ng fishermen. In 2014, the mayor of Zambales, one of the towns of Zambales, I'm not sure if it was Ibang, There, as Arsenio Lim said, there is no harassment of our fishermen. Our fishermen go out to sea every day. So there are repeated reports of this, but they're not very well reported. I will show you also the latest from PDB for that affirms that there is no harassment. But we will go on first. So from the SCSBI, up and fictions that people are expressing anyways about again the so-called report from the Center for Strategic International Studies, the US data has repeatedly released reports alleging that since 2018, China's rally maritime militia is aimed at monitoring and even blocking the Middle East construction of the giant. This was denied by the Chinese ambassador at that time, 2018, the ambassador Zhao. But let us look at the American disinformation perception war, which we have to wake up to. You will remember the 2021 singularity. Well, most people will not remember it. We keep reminding the people that the Americans, through this NGO called Singularity, reported that Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea, in the South China Sea, were scattering human waste or sewage in the sea. Maalala po ninyo, 2021, ang American NGO, Singularity, the ADRI, Institute, named after the late Secretary. Nagbalita na nagkatalag daw ng dumi ng tao ang barko ng Chino. 2021 po ito report. And it was later discovered, and it was not the Chinese embassy who said it. It was Delfin Lorenzana, Secretary of Defense, and Sal Panelo, who at that time was advisor or spokesperson, I think advisor, who said this is not true. The picture they show, well, this is another. The picture they show of that ship was made in 2014 in Australia, and the Americans published it here as happening in the Philippines. This continues on and on and on. And that's why the following image is Salpanero denying. This is another case of Western intervention to create this perception about China. And this was in collaboration with ABS-CBN's Chiara Zambrano. It is not ABS-CBN, but Chiara Zambrano's own project, where she said he was chased by Chinese Coast Guard ships. But who denied the veracity? Who denied the truth of this? It was Salpanero and Delfin Lorenzana again, our Philippines cabinet official. Lorenzana said, that is ridiculous. Because if the Chinese Coast Guard were chasing Chiara Zambrano would never get away because these are very fast boats of the Chinese Coast Guard. So there is an active operation to create the misconception among Filipino people. China is only harassing Filipino people. Now, we're not yet finished. This is one which we have in front. We must be aware in year 2021, 2022, and of course, this year, the U.S. Congress approved, this was just proposed, this is report, it was approved. It approved a $500 million additional budget, the U.S. Congress. This is from the American prospect and American government for negative news coverage of China. So we must be aware of that. Now, finally, I think, do I have the other here? I have a video to show you. Very, very new video, I think just 1 week ago. The Philippine Coast Guard fishing for fake news against China. And it's called the PTV, Philippine Official News Agency, PTV4, showed this video. I think the Philippine Coast Guard was fishing for claim that they were harassed, the fishermen. But what did the fishermen actually say? Here, I will translate it for foreign audience. So let's go the video and make sure. Okay. Ready? Can we roll it? Make sure it's heard out because the words are very important of the fisherman. So I thank PT4 for showing this video because it tells them the truth. I thank PT4 for showing this video. It's now in social media for showing this report.
Dito. Kinabukasan habang bumabiyahe patungo sa Julian, Felipe Reef, isang grupo na mamangingisda ang naabutan naming namamalakaya. Inimbitan sila ng kapitan ng BRP Malapascua sa barko at nakipagkwentuhan. Galing pa silang Bang Soprinyo sa Batangas at halos 3 linggo na nangingisda sa West Philippine Sea.
Okay naman po, wala po namang nanghahara sa amin. Bakit daw pumasok dito? Alam na mainit ang issue ng China at ng Wuhan. Sabi ko, bakit hindi naman kami kasali, sir? Nangingisda lang naman kami.
Bago umalis, nagbigay ang Philippine Coast Guard ng ilang pagkain para sa kanila na malugod naman nilang tinanggap. Ilang oras pa ang lumipas, nakarating din kami sa Julian.
Okay, I'll translate for our foreign reporters here. I think the Philippine Coast Guard picked up a fisherman randomly, hoping to get a story against China's harassment. But what did the Filipino fisherman say? When we are fishing here, we're never harassed. And you're asking, why we are fishing here when it is a disputed area? Well, we're not part of the dispute, we're just fishing. So that shows there is no harassment every day. Thousands of Filipino fishermen are fishing. But some media outlets keep repeating harassment. Maritime fishermen, because they want the Filipinos to hate China. So that the Americans can come in and say, we will save the Philippines. And unfortunately, the president today is playing along with the Americans for whatever selfish reason he has. So I will indict Bongbong Marcos for collaborating with the lie from the Western power for whatever personal reasons, because if you are concerned about the Filipino nation, you will not do this. China never invaded the Philippines in the 1,300, 400 years of association of the Philippines and China. The Americans invaded, occupied in half a million during the Philippine-American War. This continues today to try to stop the development of the country. I need to raise this issue. I hope the others will tackle it. Why is the Philippine government, the Department of Foreign Affairs, stopping the issuances of tourist visa to Chinese tourists, limiting it to 100 visas a day? Yes. They use the excuse of COVID-19 because of the lifting of the lockdown in China, and they have never changed it. When the European countries have already lifted the restrictions, even the United States and so on, here it is not yet lifted. We need to reach 2 million target of Chinese tourists in the Philippines, the target of the Department of Tourism. I think 1,600 visas a day. I'm sorry, 6,000 visas a day. 6,000 visas, and the DFA is limiting it to 100. That is $2.5 billion revenue for our tourism industry that will be lost. What is this government of Bongbong Marcos and its DFA, Department of Foreign Affairs, doing to our economy? This is criminal. So I hope I was within the limit of 10 minutes, but it's not. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr.
All the discussion.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Herman, Laurel, for that overview. We could ask questions later on, directed at him and other panelists. Thank you. Next, we'd like to invite a very distinguished foreign policy expert, geopolitics expert, international relations scholar, Ms. Sas Rogando Sasot, is one of the most brilliant intellectuals in the Philippines concerning geopolitics. Talaga, every time she speaks, I thought I already know a lot. Every time she speaks, I learn a lot. some of the, I will mention only some of her background because she has a long data. She is also a columnist, TV host, and very popular blogger. She studied BA Business Administration from Open University of Hong Kong and also earned her combined major in world politics and global justice, minor in international development with magna cum laude honors from Leiden University College. Later on, she also studied her master's degree in international relations from Leiden University in the Netherlands. She is also a very distinguished teacher, educator. Let us welcome Ms. Sas Rogando Sasso, also a nationalist activist. Welcome. And book author.
Yes.
Thank you. That means nice to
You can talk longer because we want to be educated.
I will be touching on several tips sa aking introduction. Kasi sinabi sa akin yung manufacturing consent. So actually consent to going to bar and having a dominant military approach to economy. I relate that. Okay. So I would like to begin with a question. Mga Pilipino dito. How many of you would like to raise taxes? That you would like to pay more taxes? How many of you can you just raise your hand? O, ilan sa inyong gustong taasan yung taxes sa Pilipinas? Taas nila yung kamay ninyo. Wala.
Mas maraming buwis.
Oo, tataasan yung buwis. Pay more taxes. That, the government will enact a law that you would pay more taxes. No, wala, di ba? So how is this related to our topic? So EDCA, it's being sold to us as a way to modernize our military. Diba? So sabi nila magbibigay yung Amerika, the United States will give us help. It's usually their second-hand military material. Let's admit that they will never ever give us their top-of-the-line weapons. No? For a lot of reasons. One, if ever that they engage a war with, for example, China, they don't want their weapons to be taken by China afterwards. And the second, because they don't want to. As simple as that, they don't want to because they're top-of-the-line weapons. So yun yung binibenta sa atin yung EDCA na yun because we need to modernize our military. I think even since 1946, that's already been the mantra. No, it's Sir Alto. I experienced kasi he has been part of the government. I think lahat na ata tumanda na yung mga nag-advocate na modernize na military, namatay na iba. Yung iba, na-convict na panganakaw. Diba? Or others flee the Philippines, but, with the bags and cash. You ever ask?
We've been advocating to modernize our military and yet we haven't yet reached that moment. Hanggang kailan ba yan? Diba? Hanggang kailan ba yung modernization? Now, if you're gonna compare us to our neighbors, like for example, yung mga bansa na may ganong policy, we would like to modernize our navy, we would like to modernize our military, like for example, Indonesia, Vietnam, China. When they said, no, we will modernize, you would see that they actually modernize their military and navy, etc. That's why you would see Indonesia as one of the greatest, great naval power, not just in Southeast Asia, but in the world. Vietnam is a great military power. And of course, China, it's now a military power. But these countries were poorer than us before. So what happened to the modernization mantra? Diba? So now it's being sold again in that way. We will modernize our military. That's why we have to give up our sovereignty. This EDCA is giving up sovereignty. No matter how the Americans use semantics, I will discuss it later on how they use semantics and why they're doing it. It is giving up sovereignty. Walden Bello wrote an article for regarding EDCA, and the title is really it really hits the nail on the head. Na the U.S. repossession of the Philippines, which is true. You don't any country that has a foreign military base will be subject to coercion by the country that has that military base. That's just fact. It's historical fact. And all our neighbors in Asia, Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, etc., know that because they know that based on their experience. No? Actually, isa pinakamalalang experience, China, because they had once upon a time in their history, their country had different military outposts from different Western powers, and they actually know what it felt like. That's why when I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. That's why when Chow and Lai went to the Philippines in the late 60s, he was interviewed by the media, Philippine media. Imagine, this was in the 60s. So ang Philippines and China didn't have any territorial dispute at all during that time, because it was only the father of Marcos Jr. who, pursued that territorial dispute. So the Philippine media asked Chow and Lai, what can you say about the U.S. foreign military bases in the Philippines? About China, from Chinese perspective. Chow and Lai said na for their perspective, it could be like, the United States was militarily encircling them. Well, not only was, but continuing the strategy of military encirclement of China. But he said that I think it's not so much about what the U.S. military bases do to China, but the real question is what the U.S. military bases do to the Philippines, on how the U.S. military bases affect, your independence. It's so different when you cannot have an independent mind when there is a gun somewhere, from a powerful actor. You cannot have an independent mind. The U.S. military is just somewhere over there. How can you have a foreign policy that could say no to the United States? Japan actually knows this. That's why in the late 80s, there was this book, by ultra-nationalist Japanese thinkers. Like, I forgot his name, but it was like a former minister of trade, I think, and then who became later on a mayor of Tokyo. And then I think the CEO, Mitsubishi. I don't know, not Mitsubishi. But that's the title, The Japan That Say No. And then they would like the US to leave Japan, as in remove all the US bases in Japan, because they know what it feels like. And that's why when Japan was the number 2 economic power in the 80s, what did the United States do? And the US and France, no? Like United States, Germany, what else is the country? Sino nagsasalita? I think UK, but saan dami nila? Western gang. They forced Japan to sign the Plaza Accords. So what happened after that? The economy of Japan, suddenly declined. And Japan was poised to be a really, really strong economic power at that time. And the United States couldn't accept it. Now, if there were no US military bases in Japan, do you think they would be able to make Japan bow? No, they wouldn't be able to make Japan bow and sign that Plaza Accord. That's why they're having a difficult time now with China. You know, they couldn't force China to accept trade terms according to their own terms. You know, because there are no US military bases in China, but there are US military bases encircling China. Well, it's not as good as having a US military base on Chinese soil, but it is the next best thing. You know, if you would like to have a favorable terms to be negotiated. Not even favorable, but if you would like to dominate the outcome of the negotiation. So anong relevance itong taxes? Well, if we really want to modernize our military and there is really a need, you know, to buy equipment, etc., and we feel that it is a patriotic duty to defend whatever we want to defend, and therefore we need to buy top-of-the-line weapons, then we should pay for it. But it seems that no one would like to raise taxes here, no? No one would like to pay for it. So what are we actually doing here? Di ba? So we don't want to pay for it. We don't want because the only way for the government to pay for it is to raise taxes. That's being self-reliant. But we don't want to. Okay. Now, ask the elite organization, elite companies, if they are willing to raise corporate tax in order to buy or in order to modernize the military. I'm pretty sure none of them would agree to raise taxes. No. So what is the relevance? Kasi if you sell it to Filipinos in that way, Filipinos will start thinking, why are you raising taxes? Why do we need to do this to our military? Kasi it affects their money. You know, people don't really care unless their pockets are hurt. No, but now, you know, okay, but now we are actually letting the United States do it for us. Now it's okay for Filipinos. That's why we don't question it. Kasi we don't spend money for it. You know, we're just gonna rely on the Americans. We don't need to raise taxes in order to pay for defense. So what happens because of that? We don't have any public discussion anymore. No, whether it's actually a right thing to do because it's freebie. It's free. So like why would we question it? Kasi hindi naman tayo yung nagbabayad yan eh. 'Di ba? Freebie. So the way it got skirted around, 'di ba? Kung makikita mo na hindi na magtatanong. There's no congressional oversight on what's going to happen in EDCA sites. That's the truth. You know, it's a purely executive agreement. Diba? Kaya nga, there's still a civilian supremacy over the military when it comes to EDCA sites. I don't know. We don't know. You know? Kaya nga, when President Bongbong Marcos said that he will not allow offensive military operations that would involve EDCA sites. No, if you would like, of course you're gonna accept this because it's the president who is saying it, no, and we don't really care because we're not paying for it. But if you're gonna ask it, how would you distinguish defensive and offensive? You know, when there is already a conflict, that the line between offensive and defensive actions can no longer be clearly defined. Okay? And usually, who defines what's offensive and defensive is subjective. You know, like for example, Ukraine and Russia. Russia would say what it's doing is defensive, but for the Ukrainian, they would say it's offensive. Oh, what if, what if the powers that be in this country say na, okay, we will shoot, we will fire a missile on a Chinese naval ship over there for defensive purposes. Because they're there, because there's no objective standard on what's defensive and offensive in these situations. What will you do? Diba? What would Congress do? I don't think Congress has any power anymore in our situation, and especially that the House Speaker is the cousin of the president. It's already a family affair in this country. So we don't care, because we don't pay for it. How many of you are willing to die for a feature that only gets visible during high tide? As yun naman yung kamay nyo. Yung mga Pilipino, how many of you are willing to die, for a low tide elevation? Something that only appears during high tide. Ayan. Are you willing to die for it? Or it seems that no one's raising their hands here. Or maybe it's that no one's listening to me. So if you're not willing to die for it, what are we actually doing with the Ayungin Shoal issue? No, Ayungin Shoal. Ayungin Shoal is second Toman Shoal in terms of international name. Ayungin Shoal is an LTE. It's a low tide elevation. It only appears during high tide. And according to the South China Sea arbitration that we love so much, Ayungin Shoal cannot be appropriated as territory. So meaning, even the Philippines cannot claim it as territory. Because according to the decision, only low tide elevations within your territorial sea can be considered as part of your territory. And Ayungin Shoal is outside our territorial sea. So what are we defending in the Ayungin Shoal? When we say that it is ours, what do we actually mean by it? But no one's is asking this, Kamentong, no? And this is already, the South China Sea arbitration decision has been there since July 2016. And until now, I think, if I ask a random Filipino, do you actually know what's in the South China Sea arbitration decision? Nobody would say yes. And then they would say, the South China Sea arbitration decision invalidate China's 9-dash line. And then you ask them, what do you think it means when the South China Sea arbitration decided in that way? Nobody could answer, but on social media, on mainstream media, what they are selling to Filipinos is that it means that the Chinese have to leave. Diba? 2016 ang campaign nila dyan, #Chexit. Mahilig talaga mga Pilipinong manggaya ng mga... So Chexit daw ang ibig sabihin, diba? Kaya nga, diba, yung mga congressman, mga senator, sabi, China has no business being there. And then they always reference the South China Sea arbitration decision. But it is incorrect. That interpretation of the decision is incorrect. What the South China Sea arbitration decision said was that China cannot claim historic maritime rights on the basis of the 9-dash line. Okay? Ngayon, anong ibig sabihin nila noon? Yung historic rights kasi ibig sabihin, you have to demonstrate historically all throughout that you have had exclusive control and use of the entire area. Whatever is within that 9-dash line. Pero ang sinabi ng South China Sea arbitration decision, I forgot the exact paragraph. Sabi doon, there's nothing in this decision that should be interpreted as commenting on the historic claims of China on the South China Sea Islands. And China's ability to claim historic rights arising from those islands. I don't think anybody has already mentioned this in mainstream media because it would demolish the narrative. Nandun yung may caveat eh. Diba? We don't really read the decision. You know, arbitration decisions always have caveats. You know, na, oy, wait, wag nyo i-interpret ito na ganito. And that's exactly what the South China Sea arbitration said. Na, okay, kung pagpabasihan natin yung 9-dash line, walang historic rights. Pero, ibang usapan kung historic rights based on the land features in the South China Sea Islands. And it said it got unaffected by the decision kasi it would involve territorial sovereignty. And the South China Sea Arbitration Tribunal cannot decide on that. So the dispute was actually unresolved by the South China Sea Arbitration decision. Diba? Nothing got resolved there. If you ask them, what's actually resolved? And what is funnier is that the South China Sea arbitration decision doesn't have any order. Okay? Kasi usually a decision has a declaratory part and a part issuing orders. What should be done? Okay? Kung ikukumpara natin to sa mga local decision, for example, I complained that, for example, Wilson raped me. Diba? Of course, I want the decision to have a corresponding order. Kung anong gagawin kay Wilson, si Wilson ba ay bibitayin or Celia Electrica, etc. Of course, I want na the court declares Wilson guilty. And at the same time, may corresponding punishment. So the South China Sea arbitration doesn't have the second part on what should be done. It didn't say that China should leave. It didn't say, everything that we are demanding right now for China to do doesn't have any support in the South China Sea arbitration decision because the South China Sea arbitration decision doesn't have any order at all. Actually, we wanted the South China Sea Tribunal to issue an order. That was our original intention. When the Pinoy government first sent the memorial note to China and to the tribunal. And then somewhere along the line, the complaint removed the orders. What we want, what we are demanding, and we are so stupid that one of the orders that we removed is that for China to pay its share of the arbitration expenses. Kasi usually, arbitration, Wilson and I would pay the arbitration venue or the arbitration judges, maghahati kami sa expenses. And then kung sinong matalo, babayaran niya ako. And we're so stupid that we even removed that comment. So we actually paid for China's side. And nobody's even mentioning it because it would reveal the idiocy of the entire process. Una, you didn't ask for any order. And then you actually asked, and then you have it removed. And then when the decision came out, you're asking for it to be enforced. But what is actually going to be enforced in the decision? What is the enforceable part? The enforceable part in the decision is actually the order. But there's no order. Diba? So we are grasping at straws here. And then it is being, and tapos ang binibenta sa atin na solution is we need the United States. No, they have to come here because una, mahina ang ating defense. But nobody's asking. how come our defense is still so very weak? While our neighbors' defense systems are very strong. Diba? And then second, pag ililink naman dito sa gusto ng Amerika, sabi, yeah, because the United States is fighting for freedom of navigation. And nobody's asking, what is freedom of navigation? Diba? Paulit-ulit yan eh, no? Okay, the United States is going to fight, protect freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific area. But I haven't heard anyone ask the United States, what do you mean by freedom of navigation? What are you protecting? And of course, when you studied it, you would realize that freedom of navigation historically has two components. Okay? One is freedom of commercial navigation. So the merchant ships, etc. And the other one is freedom of warships. Okay? So when the United States was saying it's protecting freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific area, when it comes to merchant ships, where do you think merchant ships in the Indo-Pacific area, majority of merchant ships, okay, in the Indo-Pacific area go to and come from? From which country? It's from China. I think 7 out of 10 busiest ports in the world are Chinese ports. So, ibig sabihin, lahat ng traffic, the merchant ship traffic in the Indo-Pacific area are traffic na papuntang Chinese ports and leaving Chinese ports. So when the United States say that it is going to protect freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific area, does it mean to say that it is protecting the merchant ships coming from and going to China? So it means to say that it is offering, it is offering security service to China. Is that what it means? Of course not. Diba? Why would the United States do that? Nakikipag-trade war nga sila sa China and then suddenly they would protect merchant shipping coming from and going to China. So ano ngayon yung next component ng freedom of navigation? Freedom of warships. So now, sabi ngayon, if there's going to be a war, it's going to be about freedom of navigation war. But it's not going to be a war, traditional freedom of navigation war based on merchant ships being blockaded. Kasi why would China blockade? Why would China blockade the freedom of navigation of merchant ships in the Indo-Pacific region when that traffic is coming from and going to China? I hope everyone realized how idiotic, kung gaano katanga yung ganong konsepto. Right? In Australia, there is this satirical show called Utopia. And we don't have it here. We don't have this kind of shows here in the Philippines. And that show released a satirical clip, I think 3 years ago, when Australia was raising its defense spending, like super ballooning defense spending. So doon sa clip, they are trying to satirize the Australian Defense Department meeting. So sabi nung leader, okay, before we present this to the parliament, they will be asking questions on why we have to spend, I think, 350 billion Australian dollars for the 5 or 3 years. And then they were asked, okay, from what threat are we protecting Australia? And then they were like, from the Indo-Pacific threat. Okay, give us more specific. From a land power in the Indo-Pacific threat. Be more specific. From an Asian. So they were satirizing how the media and government officials are trying to, obfuscate the real thing. And then, in the satire, it was revealed that, okay, they are protecting Australia from China. And then the interlocutor asked the Defense Department, what are we protecting from China? And then they said, we are protecting our trade routes from China. They're protecting the security of their trade routes from China. And then they were asked, who is the top trading partner of Australia? China. So they were asked, so we are protecting our trade routes from our top trading partner, which is China. So, do you realize how idiotic it is? And it was a comedy skit. But it is actually what's going on in reality. Right? We are protecting the freedom of navigation from the country that actually uses the ocean more than anyone in the world when it comes to commercial shipping. Why? And then the other part is being hidden from us, which is freedom of navigation of warships. The United States always conduct freedom of navigation operations every year, and every year the United States publishes the freedom of navigation operations that it conducts. So ano ba yung ayaw ng United States, no? Ayaw ng United States when it comes to freedom of navigation. If you're going to look at their reports, yung mga china-challenge nilang freedom of navigation violations, wala kayong makikitang related to commercial shipping. Nada. Wala. Ano yung concern ng United States? For example, it is concerned about the policy of our Southeast Asian neighbors like Vietnam, Malaysia, that requires prior notification or approval for warships to enter their territorial sea. Or even approve or they are concerned about rules that bans nuclear-powered ships or nuclear weapons to traverse their territorial sea. That's what the United States is against. They are against policies that would restrict the freedom of navigation of their warships. Now, are we willing to die for freedom of navigation of US warships? Diba? Yan kasi ang sinabi ni Kamala Harris nung pumunta siya dito that the Coast Guard, the Philippine Coast Guards are at the front lines of the fight for freedom of navigation. But nobody dared ask Kamala Harris, Vice President Harris, what do you mean by freedom of navigation? What is actually the navigation that is in peril in the Indo-Pacific region? But if you ask her that, I'm pretty sure her brain would fry. They would not answer you straightly. Okay? Because if they answer you honestly, the entire narrative would collapse. Commercial navigation have always been free in Asia. Always, since time immemorial. Actually, the concept of freedom of navigation was actually came from Asian maritime trade. Okay? When the Europeans came to Asia, they saw that, okay, how come the maritime trade here is like going smoothly, etc. And that's why they were able to colonize, different countries through maritime routes. Kasi nga, Asian countries never bothered to invest on building navies. Kasi it wasn't necessary. The only threat in maritime trade were pirates. Pero a navy of another country blocking maritime trades, never heard of in the long history of Asia. It only became relevant starting from the arrival of the Portuguese. Kasi in Europe, in the West, the conflation of freedom of navigation ng merchant and warships started to happen. Kasi nga nagpapatayan sila dyan sa Europe eh. So now they wanted their merchant ships to be armed or the navy to tail the merchant ships. Kaya ngayon, na-invento yung freedom of navigation of warships. Okay? Kasi nga, yaan ang nangyayari sa European context noong panahon na yon. They wanted their navy to actually have freedom of navigation. Okay? Una, to protect the merchant ships. Then suddenly they realize it's no longer about protecting merchant ships, that you actually can project power using your navy. And because of that, you can force some markets to open. Okay, that's what the British foreign policy depended on. They sent their navies all over the world. Okay? And because their powerful navy is there, whenever they negotiate with the country has no choice but to accept the terms. Okay. That's what the experience of China during the opium trade. Kasi China had he didn't develop a navy before, even though that he had the technology, the manpower, everything. But he didn't develop it because it's not needed in Asia. So when the British came, they lost. So there you see the conflation of warship and economic rights. When the British power declined, the United States took over. Ganyan naman yan eh, the empires, powerful nations copy what worked before. So now, ang ginawa na ngayon ng United States, they deployed their navies all over the world. And then they are here in the Philippines, not because they love Filipinos. Okay? They don't love us. The United States do not send its military somewhere else because they love its inhabitants. They send it because they would like to send a message, to our people, and to other countries neighboring that country, that if they don't get what they want, they can deploy these large forces from these particular vassals, the Philippines, etc. But this is not being explained to us by our leadership in this way. Our leadership is historically is either deliberately historically blind or actually manufacturing history or revising history for the purpose of the United States. Diba? Like, for example, the way we characterize our relationship with the United States right now is that we have had a special relationship with the United States for 130 years or so. But how special is that relationship? First, they came to the Philippines and stole the entire archipelago, and in the process killed about 1 million Filipinos. Then second, the Japanese attacked the Philippines because the United States was here. And then when Quezon was negotiating for the war to end, Roosevelt said no. So a lot of more Filipinos died. And then when we got our independence, they never really left. They influenced every elections that happened since independence. The CIA played a large role. So how special is that? Diba? Why is that special? Diba? We don't have a proper accounting of our history. So now the people think, oh my God, the United States love us. You know, they have always been good to us. Ganyan yung lumalabas eh. You know, but and then the people, because the people are not aware of their own history. Pero pagdating ng China, oh my God, China is evil. Diba? Ganyan. China is going to invade us. China is going to colonize the Philippines. Especially during under Pinoy, no? That sabi nila na China will colonize the Philippines. And then when you ask them, well, China is our neighbor. You know, China is just about how many miles away from the Philippines, or from even from Taiwan. It's, you know, they can go from Taiwan Island to the Philippines. The Chinese can arrive to the Philippines in just 2 hours. The Chinese have been our neighbor for like 1,000, 2,000 years, and they never even thought about colonizing the Philippines or invading the Philippines. And then suddenly, the Chinese would think, okay, it's good to colonize the Philippines or invade the Philippines. And then nobody dared to ask, why would they do that? Because when you start asking it, then their narrative will fall because they cannot offer any justification. I have conversation about this with some of our security officials, no? Sabi nila na, you know, the EDCA would prevent the Chinese invasion of the Philippines. And then I asked them, why do you think the Chinese would like the Philippines and Filipinos? Why? You know, what do we have that China cannot produce on its own at much cheaper and better pace? Or what raw materials do we have that the Chinese needed to invade us? And why actually China would copy the United States when it colonized the Philippines? Diba? Well, between China and the United States, it's actually the United States that has the history of colonizing us, of killing Filipinos at their own will, and then meddling in our elections. But we don't see the United States as, you know, as evil because, you know, as we always characterize them, they are our special, I don't know, we have a special relationship with them. So our condition right now is just like a battered wife, you know, that no matter how much your husband abused you, you still love your husband because you cannot explain why, diba? Pero if there's a neighbor or friend there that just did something or whatever, you're gonna hate them for life. That you hate them so much that you want to be part of the war of the United States against China. But our leadership is denying that we're gonna be involved in any war. Okay, and this is gonna be my last statement. Well, why are you denying something that is already out there in the open? You know, the US military, US congressmen, even the Pentagon considers the Philippines as a crucial part in its war against China. And we didn't even have any say to that. Kaya nga, on what basis can we actually remove ourselves from the US theater of war in Asia against China? Can we say no? And how can we say no? And when exactly in our history have we were able to say no to US and to participate in its wars? We actually easily fooled by the United States to participate in its wars, huh? The last time was its invasion of Iraq in 2003. The Filipino people participated in that war. We actually sent soldiers to Iraq. But that war was based on false premise, deliberately false premise. And none of us is talking about it. And the people who decided that we should go to war in Iraq with China, with the United States, are the very same people who are deciding on the future of our country. Think about that. Thank you.
Amazing, enlightening opening statement by the very brilliant Sas Rogando Sasot. Let us already prepare our questions later on. Next, we'd like to invite opening statement from Professor Ana Malindugoy, who is at home now. Can we, Professor Ana Malindugoy is Vice President for External Affairs of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute, educated in University of the Philippines, where she graduated cum laude political science from UP, and also her master's degree from UP. She is right now finishing her doctorate degree. Let us welcome Professor Ana Malindugoy for her opening statement.
Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, to our media friends, a pleasant morning to all. The last couple of weeks were pretty much interesting. A lot of things have happened, but two of the most striking events that are in many ways connected are the ongoing protest, demonstration, and prayer rallies against the expanded EDCA, not just in Manila, but particularly in Cagayan province, where 2 of the 4 identified new EDCA sites are situated. The other one was the nerve-breaking near-collision incident of the 2 Coast Guard ships of the Philippines and China, which just happened more than a week ago. As far as the protest action and rallies in opposition to the expanded EDCA are concerned, they're pretty much extensive and widespread. For instance, thousands of people from various sectors joined the prayer rally and candle lighting ceremony in Tuguegarao City at the Rizal Park on April 17, 2023, to express their dismay and resistance to establishing 2 U.S. military bases installation in the Cagayan province under EDCA. Cagayan Governor Manuel Mamba specifically stressed that the expanded EDCA with 2 identified EDCA sites for his province is undesirable, for it will negatively impact the socio-economic progress of the province, and for the most part, these EDCA bases are magnets for retaliation if in any case military confrontations would burst out in Taiwan Strait and or in the contested waters of the South China Sea. Mamba said, additional EDCA sites are obstacles to economic development of Cagayan. Foreign investors from China, South Korea, Japan, and even Taiwan will be afraid of Cagayan because of the fear that Cagayan will become a stronghold of America. Indeed, the prayer rally in Cagayan was a glaring and high-flying expression and display of the collective opposition of the Cagayanos against the expanded EDCA, particularly the deployment of its boots in the ground. It was also in many ways an articulation of support and solidarity to the anti-EDCA Governor Mamba. Likewise, the prayer rally in Cagayan was thus far a strong message and a call addressed to the national government, saying that many people are resisting and are against the expanded EDCA. On the other hand, another tense moment just happened in the contested waters of the South China Sea more than a week ago. The recent friction involves, as usual, the Philippines and China. Allegedly, a Chinese Coast Guard ship blocked and deterred the Philippine Coast Guard ship that was trying to enter Ayungin Shoal or the Second Thomas Shoal last April 23, 2023, forcing our ship to discontinue its course that almost led to a terrifying and nerve-breaking near collision of the two Coast Guard ships of China and the Philippines. Thankfully, no one was hurt in the incident. But aside from the chilling near collision incident of the said ships, what was most fascinating to note is the fact that the PCG vessels were carrying a small crew of journalists. According to report, the two PCG ships were carrying a bunch of local and foreign journalists. But to note, the area of Argungin Shoal is under the control of the Chinese Coast Guards. Now, the most fascinating questions to ask is, what were the PCG vessels trying to accomplish by entering the Chinese-controlled area of Argungin Shoal? Why bring on board a bunch of journalists in the disputed South China Sea when everyone knows for a fact that the site is sensitive and such action may provoke a serious skirmish between the two sides? Is the recent incident in the South China Sea another case in point of trying to justify the expanded EDCA, the most extensive Balikatan exercise between the U.S. and the Philippine troops, the planned joint patrol in the South China Sea between the United States and the Philippines, and the possibility of establishing additional EDCA sites other than the 9 in the future, which the Armed Forces of the Philippines is considering on the pretext that these U.S. military bases will accordingly enable a 360-degree protection of the country? Oh well. Consequently, the incident in the South China Sea intensified the already challenged and tension-driven political relation between the Philippines and China, with the Philippines and the U.S. calling the CCG's recent action in the South China Sea vis-a-vis the PCG aggressive. But come to think of it, ladies and gentlemen, anyone with a clear mind can figure out that the recent incident in the South China Sea between the Philippines and China was not coincidental nor accidental. From the looks of it, it seemed on the part of the PCG, it was somewhat a calculated move just when the most extensive Balikatan exercises were still ongoing, and based on the South China Sea Proving Initiative report posted on Twitter, USN, USAF, U.S. Army, and U.S. Marine have been deployed at least 67 military aircraft over the Philippines during the Balikatan 2023 exercise between the Philippines and the U.S. from April 11 to 28, 2023. What a bizarre strategy on the part of our Coast Guard and the current Philippine administration, staging a scenario with the objective and end result of provoking China to make a move for the journalists to cover and gaslight the incident, painting and shaming China internationally as if it will work and China will back off, while threatening a possible military breakout in the South China Sea, endangering the peace and stability of the Asia-Pacific region, the South China Sea, and that of the Philippines, if in any case the near collision between the ships from both sides was not averted. This is crazy, reckless, and imprudent move on our part. In retrospect on the expanded EDCA, it is imperative for the Marcos Jr.'s administration to listen to the voice of the Filipino people, especially the Cagayanos. The Cagayanos are mainly against the fact that 2 of the new EDCA sites will be situated in their province. Moreover, on the issue of both EDCA and the contested waters of the South China Sea, the Philippines and the Filipino people must make a conscious effort to decide which is much more important, to have mutually beneficial pragmatic cooperation with China and resolve the differences and conflict of interest of the two countries, particularly in the South China Sea, through peaceful and diplomatic means, or to be used by the United States, an external power, as a cannon fodder in its confrontation with China, as the major power competition and rivalry between China and the U.S. continue to intensify and accelerate. That is a very important question that each one of us Filipinos must come to reflect on and must make a conscious effort to decide what we want really as a country. The answer to this question also is for Filipinos to think about, comprehend, and reflect on. But as far as I am concerned, there's no doubt that to fight for what is ours and what belongs to our country is an act of patriotism and nationalism, which is no doubt admirable. Nevertheless, in doing so, we should do it based on facts and realities on the ground, because doing otherwise is like fooling ourselves, and I guess we don't want that. In pursuing our claims, we should also think of how best to do it without endangering the region and the country, not placing the country in a compromising and precarious situation that will cost us lives and the country's survival. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, again, a pleasant morning to all, and thank you for attending this media forum, and I appreciate your presence today. Thank you and a pleasant day to all.
Thank you to the opening statement of Professor Ana Malindog Uy. Last but not the least, we have opening statement from Mr. Ado Paglinawan, Vice President for Internal Affairs of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute, journalist, radio host, columnist, book author, and former Philippine diplomat based in Washington, D.C. before. Welcome, Mr. Ado Paglinawan, for your opening statement, after which we will entertain questions from our media friends here. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning to all. Good morning to all. I was challenged by Sas's approach to the audience, and so I will start with a question also. Please raise your hand. Has anybody here heard about the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco? Nobody. But everybody has heard about the 2016 arbitral ruling, right? It's always in the newspapers. Well, to make it short, the 1951 Treaty of San Francisco was, I'm going on a question of motivations here. The United States used the 1951 Convention of San Francisco to formalize its Pacific Security Lake by having Alaska on the north, the West Coast USA and the entire USA on the right, with the exception of some islands, down to the southeast, Hawaii, and down further Guam, on to the left, it had all plans of industrializing Japan, not really for anything else but to be its economic and military ally, and South Korea, okay? And then had relations with the Republic of Taiwan, the Republic of China, or Taiwan. But the lake was not yet complete because the Philippines would be the southernmost part of it. And that's why we had a mutual basis, a military basis agreement in 1949, a military assistance package in 1949 that led to the 1951 Mutual Defense Treaty. They locked us into a military alliance. What about Japan returning all its invaded territories, which was supposed to be an agenda of the 1951 Convention of the San Francisco? What happened to it? The first thing that happened to it was one of the key allied forces, China, was disinvited to the Treaty of San Francisco under the excuse that they were having a civil war. There was the Republic of China, and in 1941, there was the People's Republic of China. Why am I mentioning this? Because that locked out the United States control of the entire Pacific up to Australia. But no longer, as the time was ticking towards the year 2010, because China is now showing to be the ascending power, and Europe was turning to be the descending resource. And so was born the pivot to Asia. From all the wars in Europe and Middle East, the theater will now be Asia because, you know, the US is champion in geopolitics of reciprocity, of prognosis and forward planning. And they will always leverage you with their military if you are to become economically dependent on them. So what happened? The cue was Gloria Macapagal Arroyo's withdrawal of our forces from the UN peacekeeping mission in Iraq. And that was what Afoot was mentioning. And in turn, coming up with a joint seismic JMSU, marine understanding, joint seismic marine understanding, which, by the way, ended in 2018. And so there was no need for a recent Supreme Court ruling to render it null and void. Even our Supreme Court has become, I don't want to use the word, but I will just use the word, what is the proper word to use here? Anxious, excited. All right. So what am I leading at, ladies and gentlemen? To be very frank about it, in international relations, China does not need the Philippines. Because China, in its 4 principles of foreign policy, practices the geopolitics of amity and friendship. Stick that to your heads. When Noynoy Aquino showed hostility to China, did China come in begging for relations in issue of the Belt and Road Initiative and find out that the Philippines was not connected to the revival of the old Silk Road and the maritime component that China was bringing to the West? Number 2, it only sent 360,000 tourists to the Philippines in the last full year of Noynoy Aquino, 2015. Compared to 2019 under Duterte, suddenly 1.8 million tourists. Ano nangyari? And lastly, China sanctioned our banana and pineapple exports. Ang iiksi naman ng memory nyo. On the other side, what does the US need? It needs an excuse to pivot to Asia. It is not by accident that they gave us the BRP, Gregorio del Pilar. It is not an accident that the BRP, Gregorio del Pilar, accosted 8 Chinese fishing boats in Scarborough Shoal. But because of our stupid leaders, one of them recently died. I will not mention the name in deference to the peace of his soul. We miscalculated. Ladies and gentlemen, we did not lose control of Scarborough Shoal. We turned it over to the Chinese. And that is a fact because we withdrew our presence in the area and the Chinese did not. So what does the US do? Because the Filipino leaders are stupid. Now we have to go to an arbitral ruling so that by law, we will be able to recover the Scarborough Shoal. And not really law, but lawfare in effect. The use of law in warfare. We will make sure that despite China's non-participation, ladies and gentlemen, please read my lips. We will be able to insert a provision there about the 9-dash line. And this is where the whole kabugal of this seeming war is focused. The myth that Presidents Joe Biden and Ferdinand Marcos Jr. are trying to make the world accept is summarized in this portion of a recent Nikkei Asia report covering his recent working visit to Washington, D.C. And I will quote, pakinggan niyong mabuti. In 2016, an international tribunal, quote, in Netherlands denied China's claims to the historical rights within its self-proclaimed 9-dash line, which covered most of the South China Sea. The U.S. supports the ruling and has provided assistance for the Philippines to exercise its rights in the EEZ. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is the promontory, the fictitious high ground that the next war will be staged based on that, and that's why they keep on repeating it and repeating it and repeating it for the past 7 years. To start with, the Permanent Court of Arbitration is not an international tribunal. It is a registry of arbitrations. Neither is it permanent, nor is it a judicial court, as its name suggests. The Philippines registered for a private voluntary arbitration there that was not even an arbitration, according to Senior Ambassador Rosario Manalo, the stepmother of Ricky Manalo, who has gone southwards. Why? Because it was only engaged by one party. When you use your cell phone and call somebody else and nobody answers, is that a conversation? At least two parties are required in an arbitration. I think that is obvious because the two parties must submit to a third party. Adding insult to injury, only the Philippines defined the house rules. Only the Philippines paid for the use of the facilities, the staff, and the supplies of the Peace Palace, where proceedings were held, and selected the jurors and paid for their honoraria. Are you with me on this? I don't know what that sounds to you, but that sounds like a kangaroo court to me. In short, nothing about the 2016 PCA registered ruling is cast in stone. It is only, as President Duterte says, a piece of paper. And my colleague here, Sas Rogando Sasot, says, in international relations, consent is sacrosanct, built on the principle of equal sovereignty of states. Without consent, a sovereign state cannot be made to do anything. At the end of the consent is the use of force. Ayan na. Talagang nagpubag-provoke ng force diyan sa South China Sea. Let us make an accounting of our legal positions. China has in 1992 and 1998 demarcated its territorial seas and contiguous zones and exclusive economic zone and continental shelf in compliance with UNCLOS. Have we? Well, the Philippines too amended its baselines in 2009, notably the Republic Act 9522. But such was still based on the territorial demarcations of the Treaty of Paris of 1898 and the Treaty of Washington of 1900. Moreover, our historical and legal claims have been weakened with their exclusion in the 1987 Core Constitution, whereas China emphasizes that their submissions to the United Nations is not to the exclusion or prejudice of their historical and legal rights. I will not deal with this historiography here, as relevant discussions are voluminous, except to say that when Mao Zedong formalized the People's Republic of China after the communists won the Civil War in China in 1949, gaining control of the mainland as Chiang Kai-shek, and the Kuomintang nationalists fled to Taiwan, the Chinese Communist Party-led PROC de facto inherited as successor in interest the earlier Republic of China's 9-dash line. This de facto status became de jure when at its 26th session in October 1971, the United Nations General Assembly adopted Resolution 2758, establishing the One China principle, quote, undertaking to restore all its rights to the People's Republic of China and to recognize the representative of its government as the only legitimate representatives of China to the UN. And ladies and gentlemen, the United States signed this, accepted this, and ratified it. The claim, therefore, is to the extent of the 9-dash line, whether we like it or not. And today, using President Duterte's commonsensical logic, not only is China in possession of the area, but is enforcing effective control. Now, beyond his...
Yes. We have less than half hour for questions. Thank
Okay,
you.
let's wind this down.
Okay.
Beyond his EDCA bases allegedly for littoral defense, President Marcos Jr. is tinkering on joint patrols with the US, Japan, and even Australia in what he claims as the Philippines EEZ. But we have not properly demarcated our baselines. We have not properly established the longitudes and latitudes of our territorial seas post-2009 and our supposed EEZ.
Thank you.
So China, did it ever occur to our sitting president that without pertinent laws and defined baselines, our Coast Guard is mostly probable at sea? the reason why we are challenged when we enter the area is because we are lost at sea. China is willing to do the ASEAN Code of Conduct with ASEAN, but China will never agree to anything that will give any foreign country, such as the US, Japan, and Australia, any further access to the disputed areas other than innocent passage. Pag military, kailangan magpaalam sa China. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opening statement. We have many questions. We'd like to request the answers to be short also kasi we have less than 20 minutes for questions till lunchtime. We have many questions here. I'll start na. There's a question here. 3 journalists asked this question. Do you think President Marcos, the alleged ill-gotten wealth has something to do with why Marcos Jr. has a change of heart suddenly during his presidency and now leaning too much towards the US instead of a balanced foreign policy? Can any of you give short answers in your analysis?
Okay, Wilson. So we're in a rush. So we'll
Yes,
answer
short
that.
answers.
My response is number 1, that is the topmost in the mind of most Filipinos. Kaya po nakikipagkompromiso at sumasakay sa Amerikano itong si Bongbong Marcos dahil sa kayamanan na nais nilang protektahan na hawak ng Amerikano. So
Thank you.
it is-
The others.
Number two, wait, Wilson.
Number 2, yes.
But there is also that second aspect that we must consider. There is American deep state that determines U.S. Imperial policy. There is a branch of the U.S. deep state in the Philippines. That is the Philippine military, composed mainly of the PMA graduates, Philippine Military Academy graduates, the business elite of Makati, which includes some Chinoys and some Pinoys also, such as Manny Pangilinan, who is co-chair of the U.S.-Philippines Council, and so on and so forth. And of course, the embedded bureaucrats in the Department of Foreign Affairs, like Enrique Manalo, who is married to an American, which is an anomaly, which is illegal or should be illegal, and so on. So, the both personal and the political factors are in play here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Can we ask the 2 others also short answers only? The one questioning also quoted a prominent Washington Post article mentioning those. Yes.
Well, I think that's for the president to answer.
Yes.
Kasi until now, the president has not provided any explanation why his position on EDCA changed. Kasi di ba iba yung position niya nung senator siya. Iba rin yung foreign policy niya.
And
Position
iba din when he was a presidential candidate.
presidential candidate. So I think an explanation is needed from the president. We can always speculate if the unexplained wealth issue is, relevant here, but it's for him to answer. But nobody's asking him directly.
Thank you. Mr. Ado, my short answer, short lang please kasi maraming tanong dito. We have less than 20 minutes. Thank you, sorry.
Hindi ko ma-estimate kung magkanong argumento ang involved dito. But I cannot see any motivations on the part of the president to be going that way. So just as the Aquino vested interest in the oil of the Recto Reef was the main cause of the stonewalling of the Aquino administration to protect the U.S., siguro naman, again, nabinat na naman yan, meron na namang motivation na ganyan that is not of national interest. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will share an information that very few people know.
Yes.
So far, BBM continues to have open and friendly relations despite many of his statements that contradict this with the Chinese embassy. But
Still.
the armed forces of the Philippines, its representatives, its offices, refused to answer calls from the Chinese embassy because may utos sa Americanos cut all relations with China.
That's a
So,
serious.
number one yan.
Yes.
Number two, tama si Sasot, no? Tungkulin ni Presidente Marcos na managot sa mga actions niya at maraming tanong sa bayang Pilipinas. Bakit ganyan ang ginagawa mo? Pati ang Taiwan, sinasama mo sa issue ng Pilipinas na walang pakialam ang Pilipinas sa internal affairs ng sino mang bansa, including China. Why are you doing this? Sasot has a very good term for Bongbong Marcos ngayon. He is conflicted. Naglalaban sa kalooban niya. Yung mga puwersa na hindi niya makayang sagutin ang taong bayan. What kind of a leader is that? That is basura. Ako, Kaado, and others, Sasot, supported Bongbong Marcos. Gago ka! Tinaydol mo kami!
Thank you very much. We lack time. Next question. Thank you very much. Ang tanong natin next, may nagtanong dito, how can the Philippines or President Bongbong Marcos guarantee that the EDCA sites won't be used, sabi niya, for offensive action against any other country? Does it mean that there is an agreement between the Philippines and USA allowing Filipino inspectors into the EDCA military sites? In this case, intentions seem stronger than what can be reality. Will specific provisions be placed in the IRR? This is a question by one journalist via Zoom and Facebook Live. Short answer, please.
Yeah, short of it, you cannot, the US military is above any law. Period. If you read the EDCA, if you have this agreement over the terms of the EDCA, we agreed with the United States that we will not bring any complaints to any international court, national courts, arbitration courts, without the consent of the other party, which means that eventually you cannot complain them. So they're above any law. Second, historically, the United States doesn't care about what you say that they cannot do in your territory. Once they're here, it's theirs. Hindi ito alam ng karamihan. When the United States was still has a base in the Philippines, a permanent base, they stored nuclear weapons in the Philippines without any consultation with the government, without our consent. So ano masasabi mo na kailangan pa nila ng consent mo? No, once they're here, it's theirs. So that's how the United States work. And every country that has a US presence knows that very well. Huwag na tayo magbiruan na pwede mo masabi sa Amerika na, oy, Biden, hindi po pwedeng offensive action, offensive operations gagamitin ng aking EDCA. That's bullshit. You already gave it away. You know, the only way that you can guarantee that they will not be able to use the Philippines for any military actions at all is for them to leave the country.
Thank you. My follow-up question. Sorry, Ms. Sasso, there's a follow-up question by two other journalists. 2 days ago here at Pandesal Forum, the scholars and activists and Congresswoman Franz Castro and former Congresswoman Lisa Massa questioned the newly released guidelines from the Pentagon and the Philippines now on defense. And according to Lisa Massa, in the guidelines, it seems that the Philippines now surrendered sovereignty because even our military budget, the US could be involved. Even the intelligence on a daily basis, we have to reveal. Even the national defense and strategic plans of the Philippines, we have to share with them, and they could meddle or be part of it. What are your comments to these new so-called guidelines released last Wednesday lang. These are the complaints of that speakers here, four of them here.
Well, for me, it's just Sarsuela, no? We have to understand what we are. We are a colony of the United States, whether we accept it or not. Historically, we're a colony of the United States. We never won our independence. It was given. Those two things are different. A given independence and an independence that you won. Our independence was given. If something was given to you, anong implication? It can be taken away. That's the implication of a given independence. That's why they can always come back here and we always welcome them with open arms and open legs. No? So that Sarsuela, kahit ano pang gawin ng Amerika na isa pa sa ilalim nila ang kanilang military operations under law. Hello? Have we forgotten Iraq? Iraq was considered illegal under international law.
By the UN.
Was the United States able to stop the United States from doing an illegal act outside international law? No. And then you're gonna come here and tell the Filipinos that you can tell the Americans na you cannot use our territory for offensive purposes because it's against our Constitution. Are you serious? The only way that you can guarantee that is for the United States to leave the Philippines finally and for the Philippines to finally win its independence.
This question from Ateneo de Manila University Professor Dr. Joby Miroy. How do we, the Philippines, still maintain and balance our important relationship with China, the world's rising economic superpower, in the face of President Bongbong Marcos' obviously too pro-American alliance and dangerous military alliance? This is a question from Ateneo de Manila University Professor Dr. Joby Miroy. How do we still save and maintain our important relation with China in the midst of this?
It's very clear, nire-railroad po tayo ng nahalal na presidente sa maling landas. Ano? So wala na pong choice. Although our Constitution states very clearly na mayroon pong choice ang taong bayan through a referendum to approve or disapprove any foreign troops, military bases, and so on. Nandyan sa Article 18, Section 25, napakalinaw po yan. Basahin po ninyo lahat. The last resort is a referendum of the people. Why don't you bring it to the people? Now, on my part and our part sa ating institutions, no, sa aming institutions, we are launching a people's campaign against the bases, ano? Not against Bongbong Marcos, baka magbago pang isip niya. Kahit siya ay traitor ngayon, pag makita niya ang taong bayan po ay nagpakita na ng boses po, eh baka magbago siya. We hope. We are launching a caravan from Manila, 400 kilometers to Tuguegarao.
What day will you start it? What day?
We are still setting it with the province of Cagayan.
Will you invite the media to be?
Of course,
to the
we are
launching?
going to have a bus. We will
Yes.
invite media to join us in the bus for 3 days. Dadaan po tayo sa shrine ni General Luna sa Cabanatuan. Dadaan po tayo sa Aglipayan Church. And then to Tuguegarao, the Mecca of peace in the Philippines.
Thank you,
Because
thank you.
I consider this a second Philippine-American war. Peaceful war sana.
Thank you, thank you.
We will call a media forum by next week to
Thank you.
announce this.
Ado has a short answer to the how can we still maintain good relations with economic power China when we have this too close military alliance with the US that is too uncomfortable, according to Professor Joby Miroy of Ateneo. Short answer, please.
There is no more recourse here except to ask ourselves, are we going to obey the Constitution or not? EDCA cannot be facelifted anymore because the motivations are already obvious. The US will use it to poke at China for the next war. Does that have to be defined pa? And our president is cooperating with the descending power instead of like Indonesia hanging on to the ascending power for its development. Indonesia is now number 10 manufacturing country in the world after only 14 years of cooperation with China. We are going backwards. What is the recourse here? Abolish EDCA. Abrogate EDCA.
Thank you.
Abolish, abrogate BFA. Abolish, abrogate the Mutual Defense Treaty because it is in literal violation of Section 25, Article 18 that says no basis, no presence of troops and facilities of any foreign power after 1991.
Thank you very much.
Without ratification by the Senate or the People's Referendum of Congress, and not or recognition as a treaty by the other contracting party.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ms. Sasot, your answer to the question.
Susundan ang Constitution.
Thank you.
Revolusyon na!
Thank you, Mr. Ado. For Ms. Sasot naman, this question of Ateneo professor, how do we still save and maintain good relations with China, the rising economic power, when we are doing all these two dangerous military alliances with America, seemingly eager to go to war or have conflicts?
Well, I will give concrete steps. No, number
Yes,
one, the Philippines must fully decolonize. Number two, the Philippines should really have a realistic assessment of the geo-economic order of the world right now. You know, the strategy of corporations right now is China +1 strategy. Ibig sabihin ng China +1 strategy, they're gonna look for a country next to China in order to invest. And they're always selecting a country that's integrated into the logistical lines of China. So,
Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam.
The game is economic, not military. So we are playing the wrong game here, Wilson. So the only proper way to do this is for the military to stand aside and let diplomats and economic managers do their job.
Galing. So your answer to other question, kasi you just answered it now. There is a question here. How come daw our politicians and President Bongbong Marcos, every time he meets with US, Japan, and China officials, the talks are always about military matters? Why not about investments, tourists, and infrastructure? Why? They're asking that. You just answered it. There's a question here, actually comment from Professor Romel Banlawi. He was just interviewed siya at saka si Dr. Clarita Carlos. Both of them expressed the opinion similar to the panelists here. Stop Cold War mentality among our politicians and military people. Your comment about this? Si Clarita Carlos and Romel Banlawi on TV at One News said, we in the Philippines, our politicians should stop Cold War mentality. It's no longer Cold War era.
In relation to that, I would just like to make an appeal to the President of the Philippines. You have politicized the armed forces of the Philippines. And the Philippine National Police. The country is in a disarray. You have no answers to anything but EDCA bases. I am appealing to you before it's too late for you, Mr. President. Do not make the Filipino people choose between you and Guerra. Between you and Guerra. Because I will start a vote not in favor of Guerra. And that means you become dispensable. Please, because you have been elected although this election now is being questioned by Eliseo Rio, you have supposedly been elected. Do not waste this opportunity to lead the country to development with forces that are for economic progress and prosperity,
Thank
not for the Third World War. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ado. There's a question here from Mr. Rod Cornejo. He is trustee of the Asian Institute of Journalism and Communication and formerly with GMA7 before. I'll paraphrase his question. Sabi niya, kudos to all the panelists and to the interesting, significant, urgent topics discussed today. He said, short lang, please, short answers kasi we have 2 minutes before 12 o'clock. How will the Philippines benefit by maintaining good relations with China instead of all this political noise and everything, and not too much leaning towards USA only now? What are the benefits now of maintaining good relations with China? He wants to, parang short answers, please.
Well, I will be as concrete as possible.
Yes.
The United States is about 14,000 kilometers away from the Philippines.
Wow.
China is about 3,000 kilometers away. China will always be our neighbor forever and ever. Amen. The United States is not our neighbor. It is somewhere else in the world that's not connected to us.
Around the
And in
world.
fact, that's why, because China is forever our neighbor, we have to have a good relationship with it. How can you have peace and stability if you are quarreling with your neighbor and then you cannot find a mutually agreed solution with your neighbor about your conflict? Number 3, again, the game right now is economic. China has now revived the old Silk Road through railways from China to Europe. Okay? It has connected it already. We are not part of it because of geography, obviously, but it's not just because of geography, but of course because of politics, because we are on the because the United States will not allow us to move away from its sphere of influence. Okay? So if we don't get integrated into the new geo-economic order of the world, wala na. You know, Laos and Cambodia will overtake us because they integrated there. You know, look at how things are moving in terms of economics. You know, businesses who would like to move out of China do not move out of China and go somewhere else overseas. They go to a country near China that's integrated into the logistical hub that China created since 2000. So China's game is economic. US game is military. So it's the Philippines' choice, no, of whether we're gonna play the military game of the United States or we're gonna join the revival of the previous economic order of the world where Asia was the center of economic power in the world.
Thank you very much. That's a question from Mr. Rod Cornejo. Very nice what you just said, geo-economics. Any additional for the two of you? Okay. We have time for, can people among the audience here, our many media friends here, anyone who wants to ask a short question, 1 or 2, please raise your hand. Don't be, your microphone you could share. A short question, please. Yes, please give the microphone. And please, short answers. It's almost 12 o'clock. It's actually 12:01. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have nice lunch for everyone.
Thank you. This is Cindy. Yeah, I heard that the Philippine government is in the process of guidelines.
Can you on the microphone, please? Can you assist? On the microphone? Yes.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to speak louder.
Oh, okay, thank you. This is Cindy, and I heard that the Philippine government is in the process with U.S. about the guidelines of combined maritime activities. So there might be more and more maritime patrol, joint patrol in the future. So than before. So I was wondering what's your opinion about there might be more and more joint patrol. Yes.
Thank you.
And what will it be? It means to Philippine peoples. Thank you.
I have a comment about combined maritime operations.
Yes. I read an opinion piece. It's just an opinion piece, but that is how Chinese policy escalates from opinion piece to official later on. I read, and I can reproduce it anyway for those who need it. The Global Times has an opinion piece that says China may include the Philippine Coast Guard as part of the US fleet. Now you interpret that. They will start considering the Philippine fleet part of the enemy. This is just an opinion. It is far from an official direction yet. But I am telling you, war is coming unless we stop the Philippines from aligning with the military strategic plans of the US.
Thank you, Mr. Herman Laurel. Any comment? Short comment? Any short answer to her question?
Well, what can I say about it? Well, it will just increase the tension in the South China Sea. Diba? Kasi they always say that the presence of the Americans in the Philippines will be a deterrent. But we are already seeing that it's not a deterrent, no? The tension gets increasing. So maybe we have to reflect on that, on whether the tensions are decreasing because Americans are here, or is it increasing? We have to be honest to ourselves. Come on, guys.
You're very nice what you just said. 2 days ago, Professor Roland Simbulan said that instead of being a defense for the Philippines, it is a magnet for threat and war and attacks. There's a question here. Short answer, please. Again, sorry. What are your reactions to President Bongbong Marcos yesterday or 2 days ago saying in the US that the reasons, that one of the reasons now EDCA military bases of the US are here for evacuating now overseas Filipino workers from Taiwan in case of a war? And he even mentioned that we are going to be part of it already. He mentioned something about it. Please comment about that.
Well, short comment, no?
Yes.
The United States will not pay for the evacuation of Filipinos from Taiwan. Period. They cannot even evacuate their people from Sudan, Taipei.
Yes.
Hello
You're
naman.
correct.
Diyos ko, Lord.
You're correct.
You know, they couldn't even evacuate Americans from Afghanistan. And then you expect the United States to pay for the evacuation of 150,000 Filipinos from Taiwan. Do you know how many planes, warships you need in order to evacuate 150,000 people?
Very enlightening what you just said. It just reminds us he did not evacuate American citizens from Afghanistan and Sudan. How
And
could,
remember,
wow.
I was administrator of the United Nations Government of the Philippines project on
Bataan.
Vietnamese
Vietnamese refugees. Yes, please.
Wala
Wow.
namang sinundo ang Amerikano sa Vietnam.
So they don't do this.
Nagbangka
Wow.
sila mula Vietnam papuntang Pilipinas para masaklolo ng Pilipinas.
Thank you, thank you.
Kung meron pang naniniwala sa Amerikano, pasensya na po, bobo kayo.
Sorry. So thank you. So nagkamali si President about that. Another question, quick question. Two people asking. A few days ago, Philippine Daily Inquirer journalist Alden Monson wrote an article saying a cabinet secretary of President Bongbong Marcos said the Philippine government is unhappy about the rebuff of the US government regarding the request of the Marcos government for Philippine free trade access to the US economy or market. Your reactions to this? The cabinet secretary said the US requested all these military facilities, joint exercises. We Philippines said yes to everything, and they are. He said unnamed, no name. Cabinet secretary said the government is unhappy. This is what we get. Your comments, please.
Well, it just shows how bad of a negotiator President Bongbong Marcos is. Of course, our interest is mainly economics because, you know, we are poor. You know, we need money. We need trade. So therefore, we want free trade.
Yeah.
Diba?
We have better access to US
access-
market.
Yeah, and then he mentioned na he urges,
Yes.
kasi dalawang aspect ang trade natin sa United States. The first one is the generalized schemes of preferences.
Yes.
It's a program of the United States that allow tariff-free goods from selected countries.
Friendly.
Friendly,
So-called friendly
friendly
or
countries.
so-called.
And then they suspended the program in December 2020. Hindi na sa Pilipinas, but the entire program. And
Yes.
then what the Philippines wanted is a free trade agreement with the United States. It
Yes.
is a larger version of GSP, pero it's gonna be reciprocal. Ngayon, the United States say na free
No.
trade agreement is not on the table.
Yes.
GSP is not yet on the table kasi nga US Congress need to approve this. Okay. US Congress will not approve any free trade agreements anytime soon because they are now allergic to the influx of cheap imported products from outside. Eh, yun nga ang problema nila sa China eh. Di ba?
Trade deficit record.
Yung cheap products coming from China, that's their problem. And then you expect the United States to allow you to do that. Second, you know, it's not gonna happen. Binigay mo na eh.
We already gave in to all their requests, so no more bargaining.
Hello naman.
yes.
Kung sinabi ni Bongbong na I will not renew EDCA if you're not gonna approve free trade agreement.
That would have been smarter.
Now we're talking, di ba?
Yes.
Ginawa niya. Come in. And then afterwards,
No rental.
and then afterwards he said, "Oh, we want pala
In
free
other
trade
words-
agreement."
in other words,
After
SAS,
giving away
in
everything.
other words, SAS, nagbuka ka na.
Di ba alam mo yung bayad muna bago buka ka.
I would just like to add
Yes.
this.
Short answer also, please.
During the Scarborough Shoal standoff, when we had to leave, did the US do anything? In fact, they were the reasons why we were misled to make a premature withdrawal because our stupid Foreign Service Secretary tasked our stupid ambassador to the US to negotiate with the State Department, to negotiate with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of China for the simultaneous withdrawal when the Chinese embassy is just there at Dasmariñas village, not even 5 kilometers away from the Department of Foreign Affairs. I am sorry to speak this way in front of foreigners. Pero ang tanga-tanga lang tayo.
Sorry. Thank you. What he meant is we are not negotiating very well. There's a question here.
When China
Microphone, please.
occupied 5 to 8 islands and started reclaiming, the United States just stood by and watched, period, with their
Yes.
satellites.
There's a question here, please. Your name, please. Short question, short answers. Thank you. Yes.
Mike Kuya sa DZXL.
Yes. DCSL radio. Yes.
Sa tono nung naririnig ko dito, am I sensing na parang are you going to withdraw now your support to BBM na sinuportahan nyo initially because ganito ngayon ang kanyang mga ginagalaw?
I think the issue here is not whether we support the president or not. The issue here is what we actually want for our country. PBM is just gonna be president for 6 years, but EDCA is forever.
Ako naman, direkta,
Short answer.
noong 2019,
Thank you.
2018, I appeared on Bongbong Marcos's websites and so on. Yung aking paliwanag kasi tinanong sa akin ng mga tao ni Bongbong at ni Imelda Marcos, bakit ka tumutulong sa amin? Dahil tama po ang advokasya o sinusulong ni President Marcos Sr. Dahil inaasahan ko Remember, President Marcos Sr. recognized Taiwan even before the China even before the US, etc., etc. Ano? Si President Marcos ang siyang nagpaiksi from 99 years lease ng mga military bases to 25. Kaya 1991 natapos yung lease, pinatalsik na ang military bases. Ano? So inasahan ko po yon ang legacy ni Senior na ito ay itutuloy ni Junior. Ngayon na tinalikuran po niya, tinaydor po niya yung mga direksyon na yan, I openly declare he is my political enemy and I will do everything to bring him down.
I suggest only on this issue.
One more.
Sorry.
Pare, one more.
Short answer.
Sinuportahan ko po si Presidente Marcos since 2016 pa for Vice President. Dahil sa plataforma ng kanyang ama for a balanced agro-industrial economy and an engine of cheap electricity to be able to deliver that towards the upliftment of the people towards a new society. He promised continuity of that. He promised continuity of the Duterte administration of being friends to all and enemy to none. An independent foreign policy that was so difficult to execute. But now that he has reneged on his own promises, I say that the Filipino people is not hopeless. Because that is why our Constitution provides for a vice president. Period.
Thank you very much, Ado. Thank you. Maybe one of the last questions, somebody texted here. 2 days ago, in a Pandesal forum here, the panelists raised the question also, the Mutual Defense Treaty and other EDCA or whatever, supposedly kept mentioning Pacific area, and added now South China Sea. Is it true they were complaining that they did not mention the western side of the Philippines because we had a Sabah claim? Why is the US, our supposed mutual defense ally, silent on the Sabah claim? Your comments, please. Is it true?
Actually, hello. If you're going to the archives of the US State Department, you would see the memorandum there on the Sabah issue. Kasi nga, di ba, President Marcos then wanted to organize a take over Sabah.
Yes, sabi ni Teddy Boy Locsin dito yan.
So nagrereklamo yung mga Southeast Asian countries, no? So what they did is to go directly to the United States and say, hey, parang eventually, parang sinabi, yung tuta mo. Parang gano'n, no? Because, Southeast Asian nations always think na when they go to the United States, we're going to be pacified already. So we were pacified. That's why the expedition force never happened to Sabah, no? So
yes.
So that's why they don't care. And number two, because Malaysia is not an enemy of the United States. We have to remember as well that Taiwan and China's claim on the South China Sea are one and the same.
Yes.
So why are we not? And Taiwan actually released a statement that they do not recognize the South China Sea arbitration.
Yes.
Bakit lang natin sa mainland China sinasabi na, oy, sundin mo to. But we don't do it to the Taiwanese.
Actually, ang Taiwan yata 12 dash line yata eh. Kung di ako nakakamali. 12 sa kanila pa nga eh.
Idadagdag ko lang to. No? 6 years before the United States gave us our Commonwealth in 1936, the United States colluded with Britain to establish the Convention Treaty of 1930, demarcating the division between Sabah and the Republic of the Philippines. Yan ang kakampi ni Bongbong Marcos.
Thank you. Now, we don't have time na. Thank you very much. Baka we could request closing statements, short closing statement from everyone, starting from the right And ending with
One
Ms.
sentence,
Sasot.
one
Yes,
sentence.
please. Closing statement.
EDCA did not bring security. It already has brought insecurity. As simple as that.
Thank you, Mr. Herman Laurel. Mr. Ado Paglinawan, short closing statement.
Every day I pray for the safety. Every day I pray for the safety of all our public officials led by the President of the Philippines. May God have mercy on his poor soul.
Thank you, Mr. Ado Paglinawan yan. Last but not the least, we have sa bahay niya, wala na si Professor Ana. So, Miss Sas Rogando Sasot for her closing statement to summarize her thoughts and appeal to the President and the public.
I think our policymakers and political leaders should start looking at maps. No, especially the geo-economic map of the world right now, and see whether where we are headed given the geo-economic map of the world. Kasi we are still looking at the geostrategic map of the United States wherein we are considered a strategic location. You know, di ba parati natin binibenta na the Philippines is a strategic location. We are a strategic location for the US military. But are we an economically strategic location? We're not.
Thank you very much for the reminder, Ms. Sasot. Yun sinabi niya is nasa Bible din at saka nasa mga quotation saying, mas importante kapitbahay mo kaysa malayo mong kamag-anak na tama kayo pag nasunugan kayo, kulang kayo ng pagkain sa tanghali. Your neighbor is more important than your far away friend or so-called relative. Thank you for all your enlightening analysis, your fearless opinions, Ms. Sasot, Mr. Ado Paglinawan, Professor Ana Malindog-Uy in her home, finishing her PhD, and Mr. Herman Laurel. Let us have this tradition kasi here at Pandesal Forum, it doesn't matter if you're a movie star, a presidential candidate, or an activist, or we have a tradition here, picture taking with Pandesal. And all our media friends, we will get Pandesal gift also. Can we have a picture? By the way, Ms. Sasot, Mr. Ado, and Mr. Laurel, in the Bible, di ba sabi nila, if people throw stones at you, you throw breads at them. So, symbol of peace. We'll have lunch after the picture taking. We have a Pandesal gift for all our brilliant and courageous speakers. The recording of this will be shared to all our media friends. Please smile for the camera, even though we are tense and worried about peace. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you again for your brilliant analysis and your... next week, nandito si Professor Bobby Tuason and others to talk about... Andito din next week si Walden Bello to talk about